Our next caller is Corey from Kansas.
What's up, Corey?
What are you doing, Corey?
Hey guys, I'm well. How are you all?
Good,
Good,
man.
good.
How can we help you?
Good. Hey, yeah. So there's been a few episodes lately. You guys have talked about the importance of keeping track of weekly load. So my question comes in with that in relation to progressive overloading. So in optimizing strength or hypertrophy for a given lift, does progressive overload take precedence over total weekly training volume? For example, in the context of MAPS phase two or MAPS anabolic phase 2 and 3, where the rep ranges are higher, I often hit the top end of the rep range and then increase load, which is typically 5 pounds per dumbbell. However, upon increasing the weight, I usually fall short of the previous week's rep count, resulting in a net decrease for weekly volume. While I'm achieving progressive overload through increased weight, overall volume drops. So, from a programming standpoint, is it more beneficial to prioritize load progression or to maintain increased weekly volume for continued adaptation?
Here's the problem with tracking total volume. It's not perfect. So if I squat 50 pounds for 200 reps, I've done more volume than if I did, 3 reps with 500 pounds. Okay. Sure. So obviously we know which one's going to build more muscle. So I think you're overthinking a little bit.
If you're progressive overloading, and you are, so you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. I would base it off of feel. Is it more important for me? Do I feel better going a little higher in the reps with better form? Or do I feel a little better going a little lower in the reps and going heavier? This is where it's not perfect. So this is where you kind of have to decide for yourself. We don't want to live and die by progressive overload because it's not perfect. It doesn't work perfect. And you can't always progressively overload your volume.
I wish that linear progression would be amazing.
Yeah, if that were the case,
right.
I'd be doing 1,000 sets per body part by now. I've been working out for so long.
Just kind of toggle between the two.
You also have to factor in, even though we're thinking like in a week snapshot of total volume, you also have to think of where you're at daily. Like, so let's say today you're supposed to progressively overload, but that was a rough night of sleep last night of all the days that week. Like, so you're like, and the smart thing to do is to not overload the body on that day and probably step back, and you'll actually take steps forward versus, today's the day I got to add volume or I got to progressively overload, therefore I push anyways. Yeah. And then you actually go 5 steps backwards. So it's like, there's also that factor that you have to consider in a moment like that, right? Not just the total volume of the week. It's also, how do I feel today? The generic way I did it just worked really well for me when I was competing was I was just tracking total volume of the week. And my goal actually was not always necessarily to increase. It was sometimes just to maintain. It's just like, I just don't want to go backwards. Because what I found was when I tracked it without like trying to progress or just watching my own behaviors, I did a lot of this so much where it was like, I wasn't even, a lot of times I was going backwards in a week and I didn't realize. And so I just would set a goal like, hey, the end of this week, I want to make sure I just accomplish the same amount of volume. And sometimes I might add a set, but I try and do it on the days that I feel best to do that. And then overall, look at the week and go like, hey, I accomplished the same amount of volume or more than the previous week. I'm winning. And so I just didn't want to go backwards. Yeah. But I would use the day that I was feeling best in that week to potentially increase that volume. And
also keep in mind, this is Adam competing, peak shape. He lives.
It's the only time I did this.
Didn't have a job except for
very focused on the results.
And it doesn't work forever. And sometimes oftentimes reducing volume and load results in better results. Oftentimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot. What kind of inspired this question, Adam, is you've kind of recapped over the last few months or referenced back to your series that you recently did. And one of those moments was talking about just keeping an eye on weekly volume. And I've had that exact same scenario where I look at it and be like, man, that was a great workout. And if I look at it from the totality of a week, it's like, I fell short a little bit there. So,
yeah, you don't want to live and die by it. It's just one of many factors that you can pay attention to.
I think there's just a lot of benefit in paying attention, like you're doing right now. I think there's a lot of value in just kind of tracking, and then things tend to make sense. It's like, okay, well, that's probably why I really didn't progress this month is I had 2 weeks where I actually went backwards in volume. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think the awareness around it is probably the most valuable thing versus like, how important is it unless it was a full-time job for you, like it was for me during that time. Like it was that serious that I had to get on stage and be better than I was last time. Therefore, I've got to do this thing. And so that's the only time in my life that I really truly track volume like that, because it was, you know, at that time my job. You know,
yeah,
absolutely.
This process is both a science and an art. So you want objective measures. You also want to base it off your feelings, and you want to use both. Neither one is perfect. So if you felt like you had a great workout, you probably did. You know, you probably did. But sometimes feelings are wrong too. Like, oh my God, I'm going backwards. Then you look at your workouts over the last month and like, actually, I'm progressing.
Yes.
So you want to use both, but don't live and die by either one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I do like the idea that you're peering into it though, because I think it can be very, it was enlightening for me. I had never really tracked like that, and then it was like it was enlightening at the least. And I think just kind of like tracking food, someone who's never tracked food, and it's just like, just track it and see what happens. I'm not saying you got to measure, weigh everything for the rest of your life. It's just like, you know, it's very enlightening because we assume or think a lot of times, and we're off and we're wrong. And so I think that part of you just doing that, I think, is valuable.
Very good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, man.
Good. Cool question.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys. Hey, I think you guys get shout outs all the time for the great work you do. Obviously, I want to acknowledge that, but also comment on how I think the three of you together and Doug too, you each bring a separate dynamic to the group, and it makes this show just knocks it out of the park. I can relate to each one of you throughout the course of a show, probably 5 times over. So I appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you, Corey, for sharing that.
Much.
We were just thinking about firing Justin, so that I'm glad
We'll keep him.
Keep
I'm on the
Justin.
chopping block, dude.
Yeah, Justin, we need your little dag jokes that you kind of throw in there. Everybody, I like those digs.
I'll work on it, dude.
You know how to do the natural stuff.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
You got it. Yeah, Justin makes us likable. That's for sure. If it wasn't
Somebody
for
has
Justin,
to,
we'd be
fuck.
annoying all the time. You know, I'm glad he asked that question.
That's a good question. It's a good question.
Yeah, because you can get so caught up in tracking that like that becomes everything, and then you start to, you know, like
It's helpful at first, like you said. Insight is valuable.
but it's not it really is. Listen,
yeah.
if I did the volume for squatting 50 pounds 200 times, do that 50 times 200. That's a ton of volume versus 500 pounds for 3 reps. Now I know which one is going to make me stronger, build more muscle, and it ain't the 50 pounds for 200 reps. So it's not a perfect formula, but it is one of many metrics that you can kind of pay attention to and watch how it trends over time.
I love it as a just peering in, not as a, to your point, just the science of like, oh, whoops, I have to. It's like, no, it's like just good to know if you've never done it. I mean, I think it's very similar to someone who's never tracked calories. If you've never tracked before, I think it's a good exercise. I don't encourage you to do tracking calories for the rest of your life. I don't think that's a way to live. But I do think everybody at some point, barring you don't have some sort of eating disorder, it is very good for you to track and just see and get an idea. And I think that part of the exercise is the most valuable. To live and die by it as this is what I have to do today because I'm at this much volume, I don't think is a good strategy for 99% of the people out there. But I think peering into that, I mean, it was very valuable to me. I had been lifting a very long time and feel pretty confident in my programming when I do it. And then when I peered in on the volume, I realized like, oh, wow, I have these patterns of how I train, and I could see how that
fall
would
into those patterns. How do I interrupt this?
Yeah,
It's good
exactly.
information.
And I could see how this could lead to a plateau for me. So that became this kind of little mini goal I gave myself. Okay, just don't go backwards at them on volume, because that would already be different than my previous patterns. And that was enough for me to be able to bring a more muscular, better physique to every time I got on stage.